Endless tasks, 12 hours, 5 patients, 1 nurse. What can we do to improve patient care in a time-effective manner? I'll tell you, intentional rounding. Research suggests that intentional rounding improves the standard of care because it allows nurses to be proactive and it improves patient safety and satisfaction. Today I'll be discussing 2 main points about the benefits of intentional rounding. Number 1, being proactive allows a nurse to anticipate their patient's needs rather than being reactive to these needs. My second point is reducing the number of times a patient needs to use the call bell increases the patient's satisfaction and safety. So back to my first point, being proactive. It is more time effective to be proactive than to be reactive to a patient's needs by the use of intentional rounding. According to Hutchins in 2013, hourly rounding, also known as intentional rounding or comfort rounding, is a process of interacting with patients on a planned, regular basis to anticipate their fundamental needs. When rounding a patient is hourly, it allows the nurse to cluster care, take care of their immediate needs, and reassure the patient that she or he will be back in an hour to reassess the patient's needs. This has shown to decrease the number of times a patient will ring the call bell because the patient is now expecting the nurse to return shortly. In 2015, Hicks stated, "Research also suggests that hourly rounds help to organize nurses' workflow. They improve productivity because they enable nurses to be proactive by anticipating and attending to a patient's needs, rather than being reactive and experiencing interruptions due to patient making requests. As stated previously, being able to attend to a patient's needs on an hourly basis minimizes the interruptions a nurse will encounter while attending to her other patients. Less interruptions allow a nurse to manage her time efficiently and provide optimal care to all of her patients." According to Harrington in 2013, patients and staff were asked to complete a satisfaction survey of the care provided during these intentional rounds. Those patients who did complete the survey stated that their care was rated high in all aspects, including being seen promptly, assisting with meals and drinks, comfort, pain relief, safety, and respect. Of these return surveys of the nurses, they felt that the call bells decreased with intentional rounding and that it was an effective way to improve their workload. Here I have an example of a rounding sheet that we use at my hospital. This rounding sheet reminds the nurses of the 5 P's of rounding, which include pain, potty, position, possessions, and plan of care. Every hour we mark off that we assess those 5 P needs to our patients and document that we saw the patient at that hour. My second point, reducing the need to use the call bell improves safety and satisfaction. Keeping patients safe is a high priority for a nurse. Research shows, according to Hicks's study, that intentional rounding decreases falls as much as 50% in hospitals. That is a huge percentage and a motivational factor when educating nurses on the importance of hourly rounding on our patients. Nurses may be underwhelmed at first at the thought of another piece of documentation and another task to add to the workload, but studies are showing that it is actually beneficial for the nurses in many ways by decreasing the amount of interruptions Interruptions because the nurse is actively meeting the patient's needs, according to Hicks in 2015. Cisco Moore in 2014 also conducted a study, and comparisons were drawn with pre-implementation data with implementation data of intentional care rounds. Here I have two graphs from the study. The first graph shows the fall risks, and as you can see, that prior to implementing care rounds, fall risks were up here in the yellow graph boxes. The next year, after intentional rounds were completed, fall risks decreased by 39%. And the second graph is the use of call bells. And as you can see, that 36% of call bells decreased after the use of intentional rounding. Research is still being done on how we can better improve intentional rounding so that it is more effective, but this is definitely a right step in the right direction. Research suggests that intentional rounding improves the standard of care because it allows nurses to be proactive and improves patient safety and satisfaction. My two main points were that proactive allows nurses to anticipate the patient's needs rather than being reactive to those needs. And reducing the number of times a patient uses the call bell will increase patient satisfaction and safety. It's time that we start being proactive instead of reactive. Start rounding.